Hello, everyone. Settler's Lament back again. Or I'm sorry. 21st Reaction doesn't like the way that I start these. Doesn't like the way I start these live streams. So I guess I'm going to change it today. What's up, Settler Nation? How's it going, dudes? There. Does that make you more happy? 21st.
That was amazing.
I'm happy to hear. So what are we doing today? Today we are going to be responding to the Vaush Charlie Kirk debate. And I know that this debate was really just wacky. It's nothing like what I expected. I remember I was out and I was looking on my phone and I saw on Twitter that there was a Vaush Charlie Kirk debate going on, and I thought, whatever happens, this has to be insane. This has to be a crazy debate. And I was very excited to watch it. And I got home later on. I watched the debate, and it just was nothing like what I anticipated. Because everyone here, of course, knows that I am a notorious Vaush expert. This entire channel is basically nothing but Vaush response videos and the occasional Sargon response video. So who better than me to do a live stream responding to this debate? But like I said, the normal tactic for Vaush, whether in debates or response videos or whatever, is to it's like slap his chest and yell about how stupid his opponent is or something like that, or about how the experts are right about this or something like that. This was just nothing like that. It was very cordial, I suppose. Vaush tried very, very hard to come off as a very moderate, normal, reasonable person. And yeah, I don't know. I'm still in shock from this debate. It is still something that is leaving me, is leaving me questioning what exactly happened. So that's why I have my crack team of basedologists here to figure this out for us. Okay, guys, who wants to take it from me?
My name is John Fisher 2.0. I have a channel, Original One Productions. You should check it out. And I also have a Twitter feed, but I'm guessing we shouldn't chill until the end, so I'm just doing it right now because why not? I thought the debate was interesting because Vaush didn't seem as competitive as I thought he would be.
Yeah, no, I mean that basically is it. Yes, he's nothing like what he normally is. And like, I've watched Vaush debates before. It's not like this is just how he acts by himself. In his Dankula debate and other debates I've seen him do, he normally acts pretty wild. So I'm not even quite sure what the reason is for in this particular debate. For in this particular debate, Vaush acting so much more calm, collected, civil. And why he has acted so differently in other cases. I don't know if it's just because Charlie Kirk is such a big name. But I mean, Dankula is a pretty big name. I don't even know that might have had about the same number of views. I haven't compared to that. Charlemagne, you're the one that I first heard about this debate from. So what do you have to say?
Oh, I thought the vibe or the emotional state of the debate was the most interesting part of it. I guess, which is kind of what you're saying, rather than any of the specific points brought up. I mean, instead of being very cringe and energized, it was more subdued and kind of pathetic, actually, on Charlie Kirk's part. He actually really came off as very pathetic. He came off as a sort of box of typical conservative responses and remained entirely trapped in Vaush's frame the entire time, which is what Vaush is actually an expert at. And I think Vaush really showed the Machiavellian expertise of leftists here, where they just sort of adopt whatever, not only persona, but positions even for, wherever they happen to be, spreading their message. And there's really just no consistency. I guess if there's one thing we can say for Charlie Kirk, at least he's consistent, because he's like the same uninteresting piece of wood everywhere he shows up.
Yeah, on the Beta Kirk question of this, it really was. It was embarrassing that he didn't even do any research on like his opponent. He didn't even know who Vaush was really, and that was kind of embarrassing. he literally said that in the debate where it's like, oh, I'm not really familiar with you, but it seems like you're coming to this in good faith. He literally said the words "good faith" to Vaush, and he also said, "Oh, I'm not familiar with you, but you seem reasonable and everything," because Vaush's optics game was so good during that discussion. So yeah, it's like he didn't even know who Vaush was, and it was just embarrassing because if he did know who Vaush was, he might have had even an inkling of a chance of getting out of the frame and saying, "Hey, this person's like immoral and dishonest." So he's pretending to have all this moral concern about, oh, we gotta make sure to protect people and protect people's rights and freedoms, blah blah blah. When really there's just no like moral authority there at all. So yeah, I mean that was ridiculous.
So there's something I'm seeing in the comments which is what I expected I'd see, and I've seen in a lot of places about this debate. And I'm not saying this is totally wrong or anything, but Vaush was on advertising mode. So basically, the explanation I hear a lot about Vaush, both in this and a lot of the time, is that, oh well, he's just a grifter. He's just a grifter. That's why he was acting like this. That's why he acts differently in other cases. But I mean, I'm not saying Vaush isn't a grifter. I'm not saying this explanation is totally wrong, but I don't really know like what explanatory power is this accusation supposed to have. This more just sounds like an insult to me. Like, okay, normally when he like acts wild and when he shouts at his opponents and like when he insults people, people say, oh, he does that because he's a grifter. And now when he does literally the exact opposite, he does that because he's a grifter. I know that this seems just like an insult to me. And is the reason that he's successful not because of how he normally acts? So why is it in this one case it's a good financial strategy for him to do the exact opposite? So yeah, it I don't know. I'm not like I don't really see what I don't really see like what this accusation of him being a grifter really explains. It really just seems to be an insult to me. And I mean that's fine. I'm not. It's not like I have a problem with insulting Vaush of all people. But I don't know. People seem to say this as though it's supposed to explain something. Does anyone disagree?
Well, does anybody else want to take this round?
To me, it just sounds like the best explanation that I could think of. I'm not sure what other explanation there is for it, other than he's on advertising mode, or he was, trying to be as agreeable as possible because he's on a conservative platform. Like, conservative being in a very loose sense of the term. Like, those are pretty much the best explanations I could think of. Like, what else could it be?
Yeah, I mean, Vaush has no authenticity to him whatsoever. So
yeah, I mean, I'm not denying that. Like, there's something to be said about not being authentic, but that's the whole point of the explanation. He's more willing to be agreeable than representative of his opinion, just because it helps communicate the idea better.
So, yeah, I mean that is definitely what he's doing. He knows the game he's playing. I mean, he even went as far to say at one point, he basically acknowledged the criticism he's gotten recently from his detractors that he's born to some extent to privilege. His parents were I think upper middle class, and he comes from some amount of money, so it's not like he's had any particular hard life. And he argues that you should separate the ideas from the people, which I don't actually agree with. I think the person who is making the point is actually relevant to the point being made. But he has this whole bag of tricks to sort of excuse anything you could say about him in regards to what he's arguing for. So I mean, I think this is all very calculated. I think our surprise reaction is that it is demonstrating that he's a lot smarter than we might give him credit for. He knows exactly the game that we observe him playing, and he's not ashamed of it whatsoever. And I think in general, leftists aren't really ashamed of this insincere game they're playing, because it's all just power process for them. It's all just a way of fulfilling their desire to matter in the world somehow, and and inflict their will upon other people, and the actual sincerity of everything is just sort of irrelevant to them.
Well, yeah, I think that's right on there where it seemed Sellers' surprise and a lot of other people's surprise here was that we didn't expect him to be this crafty and everything. But like Charlemagne said, he is extremely intelligent, not necessarily like a rigorous intellectual, but more like a fox. And yeah, he'll go through whatever manipulation is necessary in any context necessary. So obviously that's the different context because he's on a mainstream platform like Timpool or he's on his own home soil. But to respond to the idea of, he's just being a grifter and everything, Dave kind of agrees with that point where it's a kind of a financial grift. And I agree. I think it's a little, I disagree with that. I think it's a little more complicated than that. Instead of it just being for financial gain, that doesn't really add up. I think it's more of like kind of his liberation of his self-will, where whatever he's feeling in the moment, really like kind of like a foxy animal, whatever he's feeling in the moment or whatever is most advantageous moment, he's going to gravitate towards that. And he's actually explicitly said this on a few occasions. What's his name? Like Rem the Bath Boy is some kind of philosophy channel, and he talked to Vaush, and like any really good leftist, Vaush was like, I just don't believe in reality, and it's just whatever I feel in the moment, essentially. So yeah, I think it's more of that rather than a pure grift. But yeah, he's crafty and he's sneaky, so Kirk is in trouble.
I do want to emphasize the sneakiness of him. Vaush may not have a particularly high IQ, but he's well trained on when to behave himself, and he's very tactical in terms of like timing. Like, when do I look good? When can I be more degenerate with my viewers? And I think he tactically shows himself to be a dick to people he knows it doesn't affect him. But when it's like normicon people, he'll always act well to like kind of draw in like the rare like GOPer who's like questioning if GOP is worth holding on to it. It builds his numbers over time, and to be frank, his growth proves it, other than like being forced by algorithms, obviously. But I think he's inherently a sneaky, deceivious person who just you can't trust.
Yeah, what is that Stone Toss comic with the guy who, basically looks like Vaush sort of sneaking in? It's the one where it shows how animals camouflage themselves or whatever to get into places they shouldn't be. And this is kind of, Vaush is like the archetypal leftist doing this, where his entire thing is just, he's just going to sneak his way into places he really shouldn't be to promote his degeneracy. And this is kind of like an entrapment game almost. I think he's sort of setting a snare for the parts of Tim Pool's audience that might be put off by someone like Charlie Kirk. He comes off as seeming like the reasonable one, or at least one of the reasonable ones on the show. But then in reality, there's this bait and switch going on. It almost reminds me of the leftist debate tactics. Like, his entire frame game is a bait and switch. Just like, there are Mott and Bailey tactics when you're actually arguing with them. Everything they do is framed like this. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, what do you mean about how this is like what everything the left does?
Oh, like, to me, the bait and switch is a lot like their Mott and Bailey debate game, where anytime you debate a leftist, which is actually shown here, I think Charlie Kirk even brought up the pedophilia point, but they always take the more moderate positions in the debates in order to win the debate and make themselves seem reasonable. Whereas their actual position is significantly more extreme and worse, but they'll pretend to not have it. Just like Vaush will pretend to be this really nice moderate, libertarian socialist, which is the last way you would describe how he actually presents himself when he is seemingly at his most authentic. But even then, of course, we can't really even say that his personality on his actual show is even authentic. It's sort of I think this is a pretty useful tactic for this type of creature, because it's hard to actually grasp the true nature of the thing when you can't really tell what its true beliefs actually are. Like, you can't really see the true form of Vaush, or really the archetypal leftist, not really on their channels and debates, because they're always presenting somewhat insincerely for the purposes of the power politics they're playing.
You
So
stunned me with your brilliance. Yes, no, I mean, yeah, that's all definitely very true. I mean, I have a bunch of notes on this, so I guess I could go through some of this. I guess, okay. One, just one random fact that I just want to fact check Vaush on, is the question of Black fatherlessness. This is something that I've heard a lot of progressives bring up before, so I don't even need to present a source. I just know this off the top of my head. Now I know that's going to annoy any lefties in the chat. I don't need to debunk his facts with facts. No, I know. If anyone really wants to challenge me on this, I can find a source. But I've dealt with this topic a million times before. So it doesn't really matter. But he said on the issue of Black fatherlessness that that there isn't actually really that much difference in Black and white fatherlessness in the United States. The issue is just that at the African American community, it's more likely that they're unmarried. But if you count unmarried couples raising children, it's very similar to the amount of married couples. Now, this is just completely made up. Now, it's based on an actual study, but the study they're referring to is a study that tracks the amount of involvement that a father has in their child's life. The amount of involvement that a father has in their child's life. It does not. It does not track the amount of fathers that are involved and uninvolved. All it is asking is, of fathers who are involved in your child's life, how many things do you do with your children? It gives like 6 different questions to try and track this. It's like, how often do you help your child bathe? How often do you help your child prepare for classes? That type of stuff. This is not, and this is asking both one group married fathers and married white, married black, unmarried white. But what it's not tracking is the like big group of fathers that aren't involved in their children at all. So all they're looking at is, of the fathers who are involved in their children's lives, it's very similar between white and black, the amount of like day-to-day involvement. But the actual white to black, or the actual amount of fathers that aren't involved in their children's life at all isn't being tracked at all in the study that progressives reference all the time. So it's just a complete. I know I've seen the study cited a lot. I saw it in the Young Turks a lot back when I watched them. It's just completely not the topic that they proclaim it is. I think probably because, as Vaush says in this, most people just have no clue how to read studies. Something I've demonstrated that Vaush has no clue how to read studies before, by going through his big-brained libertarian socialist studies.
Just to add one more thing to that, the study would also probably be, and correct me if I'm wrong here, is the study even cited? Is it just tracking married and unmarried couples today, or throughout the history, like since the 1950s and 60s?
Yeah, it was a recent study. It was just a survey.
Yeah, so it doesn't even track prior, like the last 2 prior generations, and that could actually tell us another disparity that isn't being touched upon.
Yeah, no, I mean that's true. Also, like even if it was true that today Black fatherlessness was identical to white fatherlessness, it wouldn't. It could be true that for the past 60 years that wasn't the case. But like I said, that just isn't the case, anyways. So yeah, I mean, I know that's just one thing. I'm debunking Vaush here. But that's just. I remember this study used to be really popular among progressive circles a couple of years ago, and I know he's referencing the same study because he said, "I think it's a study from 2016." So I know this isn't some new study that's come out that I'm unfamiliar with. But yeah, so I mean, I know, like, I don't even know how useful it is to debunk Vaush on the particular topics because he's just a dishonest person. So, like, it's useful for people to know that. It's useful for people to know that if you hear a lefty citing this study, it's pretty much always the same study they're referring to. And you're like, you know what to say now. But like it's like, I don't know, like it doesn't matter. Like Vaush, like as much as he pretends that he just believes in the facts and the evidence, dude, and he just believes in libertarian socialism because that's what the evidence shows, dude. It's just obviously dishonest. It's obviously not what he actually believes. It's not the reason for why he believes that. So yeah, so I think there's really limited value in trying to debunk individual factual claims these people make. But still, I guess I just wasted a couple of minutes on it anyways.
No, I mean it was a good point, and I'm just kind of blackpilled by how everything has to be shoved into this weird progressive academic epistemology where everything is reduced to a quantitative study of how many times you did your child's diaper. Like, imagine quantifying the intimacy of like a father-child relationship. It's just so ridiculous, and it's just the emptiness and vacuousness of like the modern frame is just, I don't know, it's just kind of exhausting. But to your point of if the specific facts he's bringing up isn't really much use because that's not what he's about. Well, if we just, zoom out about what he's actually saying, what is his communication here? In his phone stream before the actual debate, he was talking about, in an academic context, a scholarly context, I would just win the debate because critical race theory and they just don't know what they're talking about and they're not prestigious, whatever. It's so true. So in this debate, what is he depending on? Well, he said it's about charitability and rhetoric, and that's an exact quote. So obviously he's saying himself, it's just about framing and making things rhetorically good. Well, what else is it about? All of the arguments he puts forth, other than framing and manipulating it to make it look good, what is his main point? His main point is an appeal to power, authority, and religion. That's all he's really saying. So if we want to examine the truth of anything, we just examine that. And so he's just appealing to the rule of scholars with the progressive religion. I mean, he literally said, like, democracy, which I think is sacrosanct. He said sacrosanct in the video and everything. It's just this ridiculous thing where he just appeals to the progressive religion and just appeals to power because, as Charlemagne said, this is really just satisfying his like sadistic desire for, crushing plebs and everything. All the bread tubers, they say they're about socialism. They're about, we're about all these ideas that we want to bring forth. And then all their videos are just about crushing the powerless conservative peasants and everything. So, I don't know. That's my 2 cents there.
Yeah, I mean, that actually touches on something interesting from later on in the debate, I guess. Is this presumption from both sides in this debate that conservatives are in some sense the people in charge? I don't know. I suppose it seems crazy to expect anything from Charlie Kirk. But I do expect a bit more from him, even on something like this, where he seems to be at least be tacitly conceding to the idea when it was brought up, when they're talking about the education system. Vaush was very clearly arguing about this as though conservatives are the ones that control society, the ones that control the education system, that type of stuff. And Charlie Kirk seemed to be tacitly admitting this. And this is always the leftist dynamic, because leftism of any stripe, whether it's radical leftism like Vaush or it's more moderate forms, it relies on the idea that they're fighting the reactionary menace. I mean, we saw this even in the Soviet Union, or in Red China. There was always the idea that that they were still fighting the revolution against reactionary forces. And even though the left completely controls all segments of society today, other than a few relatively small areas, like the more conservative churches and the couple dozen conservative schools, there's still this presumption that everyone seems to work with, until a few people actually are willing to push back directly on this, that society is in some vague way controlled by conservatives, and it's just not true in any way at all. But Kirk, I mean, I guess as you were saying before, Charlemagne, Kirk is just playing in Vaush's frame, and he didn't try and push back about this. He didn't say like, what are you talking about? Like, conservatives obviously don't have any control over the school system whatsoever. He just seemed to at least tacitly be conceding that point.
Yeah, I think Distributist made this point in his video on this, where conservatives tend to stay within this frame of, once we're arguing about data, they then, latch onto that because they are correct. I mean, I think often the data is actually on the conservative side, but stacking up a bunch of data and expecting the left to accede to that, that's just not actually how the game is being played. That's not actually the battle that's being fought. So it's like, Charlie Kirk did this a bunch of times in the debate where you just enter the frame Vaush set up, usually some scientific stuff, and then you're just trapped because you're just wasting your time spinning your wheels on this like false battlefield that's entirely virtualized. Because at the end of the day, no matter how good Charlie Kirk's data is, no matter how much he presents, I mean, he could have come in there with like 100 studies for every single point he had made, and it wouldn't actually matter at the end of the day. And yeah, I see this all the time. This happens a lot, and I'll be careful here, obviously, but this happens a lot around the infectious disease discussion, where it's all just about, is this or that effective? Is this treatment effective? And once you're sort of at that level where you're just arguing empiricism, you've already given up, basically, because you're not actually defending any of your principles. You're just saying, well, we'll do whatever we interpret the data as, and oh, look who's in charge of interpreting the data. It's Vaush's team.
I mean, isn't the data itself up for peer review, especially among other people in the area? Like, what would stop, I don't know, what would stop, let's say, a research team from a couple of universities from publishing on why the data does not work?
Well, nothing would stop them. It just wouldn't matter. None of that matters at all. All that matters is that the leftist regime decides which data it's going to pick and choose to back up its points, and you can just throw whatever. You can debunk it, as Settlers Lament just talked about. He can debunk Vaush, all he wants, but debunking doesn't actually matter. Which is, sort of where the right wing went wrong, pre-Trump and the whole skeptic phase, right? Like, the whole thing was about debunking the left. As it turns out, that actually is a total waste of time. So nothing's stopping you from debunking and conducting better science, but it actually is just irrelevant because the regime isn't actually run on that.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's like you said, the skeptics. It's sort of like the archetype of this would be both the skeptics and Ben Shapiro, facts and logic. It's like I remember back when I sort of, I don't know, I never was like entirely a skeptic back then, but when I was sort of in those circles, I remember I was like really into debunking leftists. I was into like actually reading the studies they're talking about, and like showing why they're wrong, all that type of stuff. And I remember it just, their number one favorite thing to debunk was the wage gap. I remember just talking about that for years, like, watching a million wage gap feminism debunked part 82 videos. And I remember one day I heard someone like repeat that myth in person. And I just realized, wow, this is all pointless. Like, it's been years. This is one of the easiest things to possibly debunk. This is just a very blatant misreading of data from people. And just no one cares because the people with power are willing to like push just a very fraudulent use of data. So it doesn't matter how many times you show them. What you're doing is you're trying to prove something that's completely different from what you're claiming. It just doesn't matter because they have power on their side and you don't. It's nothing unique to the left. If someone other than the left were in power, they could push fraudulent data to make their point all they wanted to. but so acting as though you can show that the studies that they cite don't prove what they think it proves. I'm not saying there's no use to that. I'm not saying that I've never managed to actually seriously convince someone and maybe get them to seriously rethink their views. But most of the time, I mean, even if you do get someone to reconsider that particular point, they're probably just going to forget about it. And even if you do convince an individual, it's not going to do anything to actually change the system. It doesn't matter how many based skeptics you have debunking a topic. That isn't going to change the system at all either.
Yeah, I mean, you could probably convince a person based on a study, especially a person you know, but that's kind of that's different than, I guess, our political project, right? The political project that we're a part of doesn't really depend on that, because that actually doesn't scale up the way the skeptics tried to do.
John, I also wanted to respond to what you were saying about, couldn't someone peer review it? Well, yes, they could, but also remember that like these scientific institutions, it's like this priestly social group, and if power sets their decision on something, then the rest of the people within the rest of the scientists that are dealing with that study or that information, whatever, will basically bully the ones that are counter signaling in order to agree to create a consensus there, in order to manufacture a consensus. So just remember that it's like our information system and our scientific system, whatever you want to call it, is basically corrupted by power, where power is flowing in the opposite direction that it should. So they're going to pressure whoever is peer reviewing to, agree and basically conform to power. So a little less faith in the scientific institutions would be great. But I also disagree with Settler in that, the conservatives are in power. The reactionary, the structures, the moral rigidity, it's all in power. It's all real. And the reason for that is that the leftists basically know, including Vaush, that whenever they're opposing things, they're literally opposing structure itself. So whenever their guy gets into office, like if Elizabeth Warren, the uber progressive, gets into office or whatever, they'll start getting mad at her for not immediately kowtowing to like progressive insane policies or whatever, because reality just wouldn't allow for it. It wouldn't be politically ethical to do that. So every time one of their radicals, even AOC, got into power, they stop liking them because they have to conform to reality in one sense. But in the other way, I'm talking about reality as in structures. They interpret conservative things as like structures of themselves. So if there's a structure in place that Vaush is against, that's contrary to his liberation and everything. And so that's something that he would actually believe, because it's contrary to his self-indulgence and his vices or whatever. So that's, I guess that would be a way of describing it from their perspective. Now, obviously, the conservative peasants aren't in power or anything, but it's like they're literally against structure. They're literally against reality. I know it's cliche to say that, but when they say the F word for conservatives, that's what they really mean. Any restrictive, normative structure that opposes them, that is literally written into the fabric of the world.
Yeah, so the same farmer, right? So I think that there is, though, incentivization in keeping your general population alive and healthy, because when your general population is alive, that means they're not going to be in a hospital, and they're not going to require, government tax dollars to take care of them long term, and they're not going to be an externality on you. And if that's all taking place, then it's going to long-term not create a huge cost. And also the companies that make these things also have an incentive in keeping you alive, because if you're alive, you're going to continue to buy things, pay for things, and long-term cause a profit. I think that there is a monetary incentive in keeping the populace alive and healthy. I really don't see like the whole they're just doing it to kill us or to cause us to be unhealthy. Like I'm not seeing what the motivation for the malice is. I'm not saying you're saying it. My point is there seems to be an incentive in not, just trying to be elitist and self-affirming here. I think this is a lot. I think everyone has skin in the game in keeping the general population healthy. And despite the fact that there might be hypocrisies here and there, I think generally that's what we try to do with everybody. Like that's how I would understand it.
That's an interesting thesis, but I don't think it holds up outside of a vacuum, because all we have to do is apply that to how Americans are allowed to eat and how poor they are in terms of exercise and the ridiculous amount of money we spend, treating diseases like diabetes and other things that could be avoided. So, I mean, the health of the nation is actually managed absurdly poorly for Americans. So I think in light of that, it's difficult to say why in this particular case, if just keeping your population healthy was really such a high concern. I mean, how do you square that with all the other utter failures and even encouragements of lifestyles that are not healthy? So I don't think you can actually square that thesis. Yeah.
Right. So there is a distinct, I mean, in terms of keeping people healthy, that is a bit of an issue, but I think that the biggest issue is we subsidize all the wrong foods, like the corn industry, for example. And what that ends up doing long term is it makes sugary foods and preservatives much cheaper to process. And of course, because that's going to take place, you have a food industry that keeps pushing for those subsidies, and that's hard to overcome. And that's why these diets are so addictive, because you're dealing with people who have a greater preference for addictive snack foods. So, and of course, you can't, unlike, let's say, applying a vaccine, which is a one-time thing, you're not really going to be in a situation where, for example, you could force people to start eating healthy. Like a vaccine is once, whereas people's diets are pretty much in their own hands. So I think that there is a pretty sharp distinction in the situations, but I think one is explainable by the profit motive, but only in a different sense. Does that make sense? Is that a fair response?
It makes sense. I don't actually think people's diets are quite that much in their own hands. I mean, people do model their diets based on how they're told to eat. I mean, if you look at how some of the older generations eat, especially the ones raised in the food pyramid, I mean, a lot of them actually think like Kraft cheese and these sort of mass-produced products are actually healthy eating. And then, of course, you mentioned the corn subsidy. I mean, people's choices for what they eat, in large part, are financially driven. And, I think you could propagandize people to basically eat anything. I mean, there's definitely a factor in which they prefer delicious foods like, Lay's potato chips. But, again, you could just have a policy in place where those potato chips are just ridiculously expensive, and then people would not be eating them as much. So, I mean, I don't think we can eliminate the health interest entirely from the equation here, but I don't really see how that could really be an overriding interest in this case, given all the other ways the regime not only does nothing to encourage healthier lifestyles. I mean, you could even subsidize, exercise equipment and bicycles, but it actually encourages extremely unhealthy things. So I don't really feel like while the public health concern is surely a part of the system's overall response in this case, I don't think it's significant in light of the other reasons they might be doing this.
Yeah, I mean, this just goes to the question of what is incentivizing them, to produce medicines that would be maleffective to us, aside from like.
Well, I mean, when I was talking earlier about studies, I don't think I or most people here really, or anyone, was really specifically talking about that issue. I mean, I was I was more, I don't know how much you've watched stuff from Vaush, but him like citing studies and saying trusted studies isn't something he just talks about when it comes to public health. This is his mode of operation generally for really anything, economics, like anything. He always claims that the science is on his side. So I wasn't referring to anything to with public health specifically. Just more of how he generally operates.
Oh yeah, no, that's fair enough. But if we are just talking about Vaush in general, in terms of the stuff he was saying on like the health matter, I would disagree with the whole mandatory vaccine solution. I think that does create a lot more problems. I do think though that there should be healthy debate around the vaccine and that sort of thing. I don't think that people should just have carte blanche to use it or to not use it. Sorry, to force it onto people. I think if there is going to be, a public debate on it, I think there should just be transparency, which I think is fair, and people can, and no one is like free from mistakes. Yeah.
John, I have 2 points for you in response to the general points you've been making, including that. The reason why it's not, I agree, it's not reducible to malice where they just want to ruin the health of the population or they just want to hurt people or something like that. It's that, okay, here, I'm breaking the frame a little. It's not about the facts pertaining to the studies or whatever.
You're roboting really hard, 21st.
He's not for me. You sound fine to me.
Okay, I think it's actually my side, so go ahead.
Okay, sorry. But yeah, so it's about the power dynamics. What's the incentives for power in the system? Well, in liberalism, in our current kind of fake government, where people exchange positions of power, at least the front end positions of power, every so few years, and like it's just interchangeable. So basically, nobody's there for the long term consequences of things. And then the people that are there for the long term, including these academic institutions and the bureaucracies and everything, they're basically unaccountable. So there's only an incentive to loot short-term power opportunities, John, and there's not really any incentive to protect against long-term harm, like for example, the degradation of the health of the population over a long period of time. There's just no way in order to optimize that. And then second of all, we like to think that they're all, including Vaush, are just all a bunch of like cynical elites machinating and just like exerting power over everyone. That's kind of true. But we also have to understand that within every human being is also a desire to actually have like a belief system for real. Like you have to have something that's animating your, oh man, he left. That's animating your life and everything. So the elites and Vaush are actually kind of insane religious fanatics. They actually believe this stuff. They actually have trust in the epistemology of like the scientific institutions. They believe in them. They actually believe in progressivism to an extent with a religious, imbibing of democracy and equality and stuff. So there's a reason why, for example, San Francisco, there could literally be just insane crime levels and everything, but the leftist politicians there, John, just keep being soft on crime forever, because that's actually like a religious position that they have. And reality is just, even though it's like, oh, you're literally getting mugged on the street every time you walk outside, they still go with it to the end because they're basically just insane fanatics and they actually believe this stuff. So those are the 2 points.
I think in relation to what John said, that there ought to be, public debate about this thing, and it would be good if we could have public debate about, anything really that actually mattered. But I think the idea of public debate is much like our politics, where it all just sort of happens in this virtualized environment, sort of like the whole debate we're talking about right now. I mean, this thing is really just virtualized in this little box, and it doesn't actually matter for anything that the ruling elite are actually going to do. I mean, I think anything that's actually included in what we so-called public debate essentially comes out as irrelevant, just as our democratic system itself at this point is more or less irrelevant. It's all just the show. It actually has very little. There's very little of consequence that can actually be done through these mechanisms. So this sort of gets into the overriding pointlessness of the debate itself. I think that's sort of the key takeaway here, is this whole the idea of debate between left and right itself on anything is entirely pointless at this juncture. And this debate in particular highlighted that very sharply, because, Vaush and Charlie Kirk are both the fakest of the fakes in terms of representing left and right. And to top it off, Tim Pool is the ultimate centrist, which is not even a real position anyway. So it's just I think the debate is sort of this distilled 12-year aged distillation of how pointless this whole concept of having good faith discussions between sides is at this point.
One point to address here, though, is, and you kind of addressed it with the whole centrist position. I don't think there is really a debate, like in terms of position, because they're all liberals. The only difference between Vaush, Poole, and Kirk is a right liberal, Vaush is a left liberal, and of course Tim Poole's like right at the center. I'm kind of curious as to how, let's say, if we were to actually implement like a real conservative solution, what would that look like? So could I perhaps bring that up as a bit of a topic change?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Conservative solution to
I'm
what?
sorry, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Oh, a conservative solution to, let's say, everything going around with the vaccine, because it seems Kirk's point was mostly about individual choice.
Okay, yikes! I do not.
Oh, okay, not the vaccine. How about?
I just want to be clear. I want to be clear for the audience that if you want to know about the vaccine, go to cdc.gov. We respect science here, and science deniers are not welcome on this channel.
Exactly. All right.
I hope you're all wearing 4 masks.
Well, I'm wearing 5 because I don't want to kill people, Settler.
Thanks.
Okay, there is mask hysteria. Not gonna lie about that, but yeah, maybe a different topic. How about the critical race theory stuff? Because that was also
yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think I think that there is a distinction to be had though between like the critical race theory like that's taught in like law schools versus and Settler left, and the like wokeism that's usually taught in everywhere else. So I think they were pretty right to point out that critical race theory is about, like, when it's taught in law schools, from what I understand, it basically says that there are systems of oppression. These systems of oppression are always motivated by the ulterior motives of the ruling class, i.e. white people. And like even when there is like positive change, it's usually made in the self-interests of the ruling class. And so, for example, desegregation, that was some would argue that wasn't actually done as a way of addressing injustice. That was mostly done as a means of saving face of America's reputation globally, because that was always a thing that the Soviet Union was pointing out, just to take one example. And basically it agrees with like postmodernism that there is no neutral space or neutral reason, that it's always in service of something. That would be the first thing. And the second thing is that systems of power are always like self-preserving. So basically it tries to it just sees everything from that sort of racial lens. So with that in mind, would anyone like to comment on CRT, and if that's like really the stuff that's dwindling down, or like is it just hysteria on our part? Because I'm likely to think it's not hysteria. That's me though.
Well, this was actually a point that Charlie Kirk actually made a pretty good point on, rather clumsily, but he points out that in the very technical sense, the specific ideas of critical race theory aren't being taught explicitly verbatim to school children and stuff. But he made the really good point that the whole critical race theory debate or debacle that's happening right now, sort of in the public sphere, is it's sort of a placeholder word for this larger direction that conservatives and right wingers see happening in politics, and critical race theory is just like the words someone gave them for this thing. And Charlie Kirk actually demonstrated legitimate understanding of what's really going on here. It's not about the doctrine of critical race theory per se. It's that in schools you do get fed this narrative. Even when we were in school, let alone kids in school now, you get fed this general, very insidious, anti-Western, anti-white person narrative, and you're never really. It's not like you're ever told explicitly, or maybe you are now in some cases, but in general, you're not like told explicitly. West bad, white people bad. Maybe you're told Christianity bad. That could be something that's probably more common than the other two. So there is actually this subversive force that unfortunately has already permeated the education of all people who go to any school system, higher level education included. So I mean, I guess the reaction to what we call critical race theory as a concrete descriptor for this more general phenomenon, well, the reaction has come way too late. I mean, people are noticing that critical race theory is now just the default and entirely accepted philosophy, basically, of how Western history is taught in school. So the reaction is very much pointless in the immediate sense, in that, well, it's too late to really do anything about this. It's too late to take any preventative measures because, well, it's already happened. It's already been ingrained utterly in our institutions. So the reaction is just way too late here.
Hey, whoa, Charlemagne. Vaush, you're from the South, right? Vaush assured me that you would get pro-Confederacy education.
Well, I mean, I probably shouldn't comment on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is all just like such dishonest stuff. I mean, I know everything from Vaush is going to be dishonest. But still, it's just like, I remember going to grade school. It wasn't that long ago. I remember feeling ashamed for being white. Like this isn't, this isn't like 8-dimensional chess stuff. And yeah, it's not that they say you should be ashamed for feeling white. But when it's when it's like half your education system is about half of like your history education is about the terrible things that white people in your country have done, then like they know how the blanks are going to be filled in. There's no mystery about what's going on here. I mean, of course, I'm not white. I'm Med, but they of course tried to racialize me as white. So that also happened. But yeah, no, it's I mean, this isn't anything new. Like, talking about critical race theory as though this is a new project, as though any of these problems that conservatives are citing is new. This has been going on for, I don't know, as long as I've been in school. At least I know that. I'd assume quite a bit longer than that too, also probably. But none of this is new. This is just the final conservative backlash against this project before we're all forced to accept this entirely. I stunned you all with my brilliance. 21st reaction. You haven't said much. Chime in.
Well, I've said a ton. Cringe Volker hasn't said much, but to be honest, I'll
Cringe
take
Walker. Okay, reaction. Go ahead.
But Settler, in the education system, they didn't systematize it and explain in academically sophisticated detail the power dynamics between the races and everything. So you are debunked. But no, I mean, it's It's literally all a joke, and duplicity is their refuge, I guess. I don't know how to say it. I mean, honestly, that's all he does. It's literally the only thing he does. He does the Mott and Bailey, and he does just like the kind of lying. And I mean, once you understand that, there's no point to any of this. So I don't know, Cringewalker, you say something.
Cringewalker, even here?
Is he even here?
I'll take that.
He's in VR.
I think Charlie Kirk sort of sidestepped the Mott and Bailey. I don't remember what Vaush's specific reaction to Charlie Kirk sort of preempting the, well, technically critical race theory isn't thought response. He did what?
Vaush moderated and he backed off and was like, "Oh yeah, I understand. It's it's difficult, it's confusing and stuff." Even though in the phone stream he was preparing to be condescending, where it's like, conservatives don't know about critical race theory because they're so uneducated and stuff. But once he saw that Charlie Kirk was going to be able to handle it, he became less aggressive because that would have been bad optics, obviously.
Yeah, I guess you could kind of see him shifting strategies in real time, which of course Charlie Kirk cannot do. I mean, everything he has is prepackaged. Like, he seemed like a very static character in that debate. It's like the same box of canned responses that he or anyone, exactly like him. There's like hundreds or thousands of conservative pundits exactly like him that literally just have these prepackaged responses. Like he can't adapt to Vaush's reframing of or tactical switches at all. The moment, like it's kind of like he's just not even thinking. I mean, the moment Vaush does something unexpected, I mean, really the whole debate I think was just unexpected for Charlie Kirk. He doesn't even know how to deal with it. And I mean, it's hard for me to imagine he doesn't know who Vaush is, but if he didn't research the guy at all, I mean, that's just completely pathetic too. I mean, not only does this guy have no adaptability within debate, he doesn't even bother to prepare in the slightest for the person he's debating. I mean,
this was an in-person debate. So it's not like this is just some random live stream he jumped on.
No, and certainly he knows that Tim Pool's show is significant. I mean, even if he doesn't know who Vaush is, I mean, maybe we'll accept that he didn't know who he is, but he certainly should have at least looked him up. I mean, the fact that he called Vaush decent and expressed sentiments like, well, he didn't think Vaush would do certain bad things. I don't remember what it was, but Vaush was like,
he said at the person, I think you're coming at this in good faith.
Oh yeah. I mean, anyone who knows anything about Vaush, I mean, the whole debate was not in good faith.
And the thing is, I really try hard a lot of time to be charitable, to assume people are coming in good faith. It's just, you all know me, Settlers Lament, world famous Vaush expert. I know Vaush just isn't one of those people. So it's just like, it doesn't take, becoming a world famous Vaush expert to know that Vaush just isn't one of those people.
Yeah, so that was sort of the greatest loss of the whole thing, is Charlie Kirk just admitting that Vaush is reasonable. I mean, and a decent person. I mean, there's that famous like political compass meme of him like saying things in each box, which was actually, that was a very cringe moment. I think Tim Pool said that being a left libertarian in the green square in the lower left is like the hardest square, and just talking about the political compass. I mean, serious, what's supposed to be a serious discussion at this point is just silly. I mean, like that there. I mean, it's hard for me to even put into words how silly it is to actually consider that as anything more than a meme. I mean, like, what are you doing when you're sitting here in a serious, what's supposed to be a serious debate, and you're talking about which square on the political compass is like the most difficult to have an ideology in? I mean, what even is that? Like,
I mean, the political compass is not really a serious tool. It's like horoscopes for dudes who kind of follow political videos. That's about it.
Yeah, it is just a horoscope. They can be fun, but they shouldn't be taken seriously. I mean, really, I don't even understand why Charlie Kirk really allowed Vaush to get away with the whole concept of left libertarianism. And Vaush, of course, made these claims that libertarianism was originally a left-wing ideology and it was taken over by the right wing. And he's he talks about how like the socialists are, they're for freedom, and they're for freedom in everything. They're for democracy and everything, including economics. I mean, he's just a pro at this framing to make socialism seem like it's so bizarre for him to make like his Marxist socialism or whatever his socialism is appear like libertarianism when it obviously is not. I mean,
well, I mean, he is correct that historically the term libertarianism was originally associated with the left.
Yeah, but everyone in good faith knows that when you talk about libertarianism, that's not what's being discussed. We're not talking about 19th century libertarians. We're talking about libertarians today. So describing yourself as like a left libertarian in today's political dialogue is just fundamentally dishonest, because that's not what he is.
Charlemagne, he just wants worker co-ops, bro. Democratize the workplace.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm a bit sympathetic to him on this point, because I think, I think his ideology is just the peak Enlightenment view of liberty. So I don't know. I don't think it is. I think it almost is true to say that, by the modern conception of liberty, the incorrect conception of liberty, his view does just represent the peak form of that.
Yeah, I agree. He's not. It's hard to even actually call him a socialist. I mean, I guess he's just perhaps libertine would be the best word. I mean, if you look at like that account Amy Therese, who I blocked because she's really annoying, and but she's like a actual Marxist socialist, right? Like probably one of the only ones left in the world, and has completely different takes than what Vaush does. I mean, I don't think any serious intellectual socialist would even recognize Vaush as a socialist. And I guess the funny part is that Vaush would probably be welcome in certain parts of the Libertarian Party at the moment. So maybe there's a little something there, but I think he's using that concept in a dishonest way, because he does not want libertarianism as like most people would think of it. He basically just wants to, he wants to redistribute. When he talks about applying democracy to economics, he's literally just talking about taking money from wealthy people, especially wealthy white persons, and giving their property to non-white lower class persons in order to disempower the bad white people. That's what he's trying to do. And like if you actually talked to even if you talk to a legitimate like Lawbert, right, like someone in the Libertarian Party, like the comical wing of it, like they would not, that's not what they want, right? So even in that frame, he still doesn't match up. I guess in terms of degeneracy, right, he matches up with some parts of libertarians, but economically he's not at all related to their philosophy, because even the libertine, degenerate libertarians, they don't want this kind of economic redistribution, but he actually does. It's a very bizarre amalgamation of concepts he brings together. But I guess it's just because he can just use whatever he just morphs into whatever creature he needs to be for whoever he thinks he's talking to at the time, as you can see him do in real time with Charlie Kirk.
Yeah, I mean, the libertine aspect of it is true. I would say, the only way to make sense of him is to think of Marxists post-Foucault, where they're literally like, it's a different version of liberation theology. As it gives a new meaning to those words, though, literally, but where it's literally what's it called? The body without organs. That's an academic paper written by Deleuze and Guattari, where they're talking about just the free-flowing expression of desire in any situation. I'm paraphrasing it pretty poorly, but basically, like in any situation, they want to liberate themselves from the structure and just enjoy themselves. It's really weird.
The correct measure of liberty is your ability to follow Jesus.
Very true.
Simple.
And the political compass thing, I wanna give a steel man for them. So let's think of this from their perspective, because we're looking from outside the looking glass, and all three of those people there, like all three of them, maybe not Vaush, he doesn't believe in anything, to be honest. But like Tim Pool and Charlie Kirk, they genuinely believe in like the political compass, like the meme, where it's just the 4 quadrants in the box and everything. That's their mental frame. They actually believe in that. Well, why? Because you need an organizing way in order to organize ideology in some kind of consistent, systematic way. But the reason why it looks so cringe to us is because it's within the 20th century secular frame and everything. And so, seeing it from the outside, you see how vacuous it is, how empty that description of things are, because there's no way similarity between, for example, Islam and Catholicism, even though both of them are put in the top right category and everything. So it's just this ridiculous way to order things. But whenever you live in a vacuous postmodern society that doesn't have any central culture, of course they're going to try and systematize things in some way. But
you stunned me with your brilliance. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, let me check my notes. What else? I don't know what else I have to say. Does anyone have anything else they not have to say? Oh, I know one thing I have to say. What was more about this education topic. So earlier, so I was talking about you before how Vaush was talking about education, and he was saying about at CRT when Kirk was presenting some of the more crazy and radical things that CRT proponents have talked about. Kirk was, or Vaush said that, but is anyone really saying that like these most crazy CRT things is the only way that things should be viewed, or are they just saying that, are they just saying that this is like a view that should be presented to students so students can have different ways to think about this? And Kirk's response to this was actually pretty good. His response was that the point of education shouldn't be to just present people with a bunch of terrible opinions. It should be to guide children towards the truth and the good. Which I actually, I basically agree with Kirk on that point. But one I just wanted to call I just wanted to call out. I wanted to call out Vaush on just dishonesty. And again, I mean, I know it's a bit besides the point to call out leftists on dishonesty, especially someone like Vaush. But just because it's just because it's expected doesn't mean it shouldn't still be done. But in this context, he was saying, that view might be a bit radical, but might be a bit wild. Even I, Vaush, the libertarian socialist, may not defend it. But shouldn't we just allow kids to see different points of view? Well, you guys can, for anyone that hasn't already seen it or doesn't remember, you can watch my most recent response video to Vaush, the one about Vaush and PragerU. And you'll see him there saying that the only circumstance under which a child should watch PragerU in class is in a class deconstructing political propaganda. And that's, of course, not what he's saying in this case for what he admits is wild views on CRT. He says even in that case, it should just be presented as a potential view. So again, I mean, I know it's obvious. I know Vaush is, I know we all know Vaush is dishonest. I know we all know that like Vaush, contradicts himself if you're expecting, some sort of abstract consistency. But still, I like to point that out. But still, just to get the point across a bit more. I think it's important for us. I think a lot of people in these spheres probably already understand this, but I think it's important for us to understand that whenever you hear normal sorts of people say stuff like normal conservatives, normally who you'll hear this from, say stuff like the point of education shouldn't be to indoctrinate people; it should be to teach people. This is just a meaningless catchphrase. The point of education is always and can be nothing other than indoctrination. It's just a question of are you indoctrinating people into good things or indoctrinating people into bad things? Now, I'm not saying there isn't any room in education for teaching people how to think, and that that it is not true that you can't both teach people what to think and how to think. But it's not simply about teaching people how to think. Education isn't a market. You can't just propose a bunch of ideas to people and let them come to whatever conclusion they want. This is not what education is like today. It's not what education has ever been like. It's not what education should be like. It would not be education if it was like that. It's not even really possible to have education in this sort of weird boomer liberal vision of how it's often promoted by sort of center-right conservatives. But I know I'm just kind of rambling. Does anyone have anything to say to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's education certainly should teach, what you'd call reasoning skills to some extent. But I mean, you also kind of, if you don't apply some level of propaganda to the education, then it's going to be inserted in there by some other force which is to propagandize. I mean, it's kind of like a power vacuum situation. So I don't think there's anything wrong with having a certain level of propaganda, because it's not even to say just like kids need it. I mean, adults need propaganda as well, basically to just the same extent. I think this actually kind of ties into this need for positive vision that we've been doing over the last week. Like, people really want positive vision, and I think a large reason for that is actually just like as a propagandistic reason. Like, people need to be convinced that they're actually doing the right thing by having it framed in some good way to them, which is, I think you should have patriotic education in the United States, as Boomer president put it a few months ago. He's right about that, and and Vaush, of course, Vaush is being dishonest when he says like it should be critical race theory should be presented. I mean, obviously he doesn't just want critical race theory presented. He wants that his general ideology taught specifically in place of other things, just as much as any other person, just as much as Charlie Kirk would prefer his taught over Vaush's. I mean, I think either of those parties, or really most people, I don't think anyone can honestly say, or maybe a very slim segment of people, that they sort of just want all possible interpretations of history just sort of taught in this neutral, equal way, because I don't believe anyone actually thinks that way. People obviously want the children of the society, not even necessarily their children, taught in some specific way that they think is appropriate, without giving like equal credence for equality's sake to any possible counterpoint. You could also just sort of spend infinite time, like how do you even select for which counter theories or narratives are presented as options? I mean, there has to be some sort of selection bias so that you can even move on from one topic, right? So I don't think you can get rid of that, nor would you want to get rid of it.
I can't wait to be the minister of propaganda in the next regime. On every billboard, the 9 First Fridays. Just perfect. But I mean, yeah, there's always going to be a bias because liberalism is a lie. One of the things I was thinking of in there was, so they were talking about critical theory and everything, and it's like, oh, he doesn't understand critical theory, blah, 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 blah. What's interesting to note is that critical theory, like in its essence, is literally just about analyzing power dynamics. And obviously, because it's being conveyed by leftists, they're going to analyze it in their direction, where they're obviously saying the upper class, the capital class oppressed the working class. Like, that's the traditional critical theory that he was referring to, which they use it in order to give Marxist narratives and stuff like that. But it's just interesting to notice that even their like ideology and their beliefs, like even when in academia and they're like conveying their religion, it's like it's critical theory where they're just obsessed with power dynamics and how to exploit them. It's the strangest convergence between power mongering and religious belief, and that's what's so dangerous about it, because the farther they go, the better they feel about it, you know. And that's of course why they have to say, oh, you know, it's the reactionary menace persecuting us. They always have to maintain the moral high ground in the situation in order to justify it farther. So yeah, I mean, pretty spooky religion.
Someone was mentioning in chat not watching the debate. I think the debate is actually very much worth watching. Not really for the content, but I just find the fakeness of it very. It's like magnified, and it's really interesting to just watch it at that level. I also have a really low cringe sensitivity as well, so that might be why I can stomach it. But I just find the debate fascinating on that level, and not really in regards to any particular thing being discussed, because I don't actually care what any of these people think about any topic they could possibly bring up. But the fakeness of it is really interesting. Just because it's, like I said earlier, it's like the perfect microcosm of like our entire politics as we know it. Where like it's just it's fake all the way down.
The dialectic.
Yeah,
Or-
no, I mean it's really it really was a fascinating debate. It's strange. I don't know. Got a super chat where I do not know how to pronounce this guy's name. For $7, it's an error when dealing with liars to be concerned about the truth. So true. Though if I'm a liar, maybe you have no idea if I'm lying when I say it's so true. So does anyone have anything else to say?
Just a friendly reminder that 1 year ago, Charlie Kirk was talking about America is a set of ideas, and America is a set of ideas that anybody can have around the world in this global empire that we spread. Now, I'm just kidding. He didn't say that part. But and then moral libertinism and everything. A year later, after he gets groiped, he literally said during this debate, I was amazed. He actually said it. The America First pivot, where he pivots to, he actually said this time, no, America is a nation of people that we have to support. He literally said that, so it's a perfect pivot of that. And then also, he said at another time, Vaush was like, are you anti-gay? And he said, I support the traditional family. So Vaush was like, oh, you're anti-gay.
Yeah, I recall both those parts. That you're right. That is really interesting.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't watch Charlie Kirk, that much, but it is interesting that I know, from the couple of interviews I have seen from him, he does, seem to try and come off as conservative as he possibly can. He's not trying to just look like, a really bland, moderate, centrist person, even though, that is what he is. He is trying to, seem like he's actually really conservative.
Right. Well, the entire, let's say, conservative elite, political elite, including Charlie Kirk, are these born and bred cosmopolitans that, went through academia and everything, and are part of the Brahmin class. So they have to do this acting campaign where he's really acting the part. It was a pretty, not gonna lie, it was a pretty good acting performance if he was going to act like what a normie conservative is like in 2021. So good on him. But yeah, so it's just, kind of disappointing to see all of that. But on another note, what was also I would say that it's very educational, this debate that you watch, even if it looks boring on the surface. But I mean, Vaush was a perfect example of the person St. John Vianney was talking about in his writing, where he did the catechism, and he's doing the catechism on this, on that, and that. And for the section on lust, he says, let me find it. Oh, crap. Yeah, let me find it. Once plunged into this mire, which is lust that we're talking about, we cannot get out. We make a deeper hole in it every day. We sink lower and lower. Then we lose the faith. We laugh at the truths of religion. We no longer see heaven. We do not fear hell. And then another part, he talks about God gives up the impure to all the wicked inclinations of his heart. He lets him wallow like the vile swine in the mire and does not even let him smell its offensive exhalation. That's actually what he's like. He doesn't even acknowledge like the filthiness of it. And he is kind of unfortunately like a pig rolling in the mud. The immodest man is odious to everyone and is not aware of it. He is not ashamed. He has a face of brass and a heart of bronze. It is in vain you talk to him of honor, of virtue. He is full of arrogance and pride. The eternal truths, all these things, nothing terrifies him. Nothing can move him. So of all the sins, this is the most difficult to eradicate. So, I mean, when I read that, I actually did directly think of Vaush, because that's the situation we're in. It's like there's nothing you can say to this person. There's no point in trying to introduce elevated concepts like virtue and honor when they just don't even value anything.
Yes, so true. Yeah, I'm not sure if I have much more to add.
Yeah, I think I said everything I really have to say on the debate. I don't really have much thought on their particular, their particular points. More so just the general feel of the debate. And yeah, I still think you should watch it if you haven't watched it, just because of that. And I think you'll actually feel bad for Charlie Kirk in some cases, because he can't really handle Vaush, which is pretty funny.
Yeah, no, that's true. John Fisher, did you have anything left to add?
No, nothing really. It was a good chat. Thank you for inviting me. Sorry I was a bit silent during most of it. It's just that I didn't really have too much to say.
Yeah, no, I mean, you talk quite a bit. Yeah, okay, shill time, I guess.
Yeah, I guess I'm really I have a bad work-life balance right now, but I'm trying to get back to make videos, especially since NRX stuff is sort of entering the mainstream, so it's really important to actually be gatekeeping now. I am getting some blogs out though, so subscribe to my Substack, charlemagne.substack.com, and of course I've got the charlesmagne2 Twitter account. Yeah, that's it for me really.
John? Shill?
Well, I already shilled in the beginning, but why not? Twitter, johnfisher2.o. That's the number 2, DOT, and the number 0. And of course, you can find me at Original Win Productions on YouTube. And I'm going to be streaming after this, my last in a series of videos on the Trinity, giving a consistent relative identity logic interpretation.
All right, and then I'm the 21st reaction. I might make more videos soon, but really, like, I only have one message. There's only one important thing that I have to say, and it is that you have to do the 9 First Fridays. You have to look it up, and you just have to do it. That's all.
Well, very based 21st. Thank you, everyone. Bye.